Okay, so controlled experiments. An experiment deliberately imposes some treatment on individuals in order to observe their responses. So what we're interested in doing is maybe giving someone an experimental medication. Maybe we're interested in seeing the effects of stretching for 20 minutes a day. And then what we're going to do is we're going to see if that makes a change in our response variable. Okay, so the variable that we're interested in seeing it has an effect on. Okay, the researcher is going to manipulate those factor levels to create treatments. So if we're looking at stretching, we could have one group that does no stretching, another group that stretches for 5 minutes a day, and then another group that stretches for 20 minutes a day. Right? So we would have different levels there. We'll randomly assign subjects into those treatment levels, and then we'll compare the responses to see if stretching had some sort of impact on something that we're interested in. Okay, so we impose treatments and controls and then observe characteristics and take measurements. So if we return to our example of music and grades, if I turn that into an experiment, what I can do is take all the students in Math 113 and I'll randomly assign you into one of two groups. One group will be assigned to participate in a musical activity for an hour a day, and the other group will not be allowed to participate in any music. Okay, so that maybe we'll do that for the rest of the semester, and we'll look at the grades on the final to see if music had any impact on grades. All right, so problem number 2 on your classwork, I'd like you to go ahead and pause the video and give that a try. Then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, so I really hope that you gave that a try, and let's go ahead and talk about these. So a student watches picnickers with a large cooler of soft drinks to see whether teenagers are less likely than adults to choose a diet soft drink over a regular soft drink. Okay, so the researcher isn't doing anything, the student researcher isn't doing anything, so we would say that this is a study. Although this is a little bit dubious, I feel like if you were lurking in a park watching, recording what drinks people were taking out of a cooler, someone might call the cops on you. But needless to say, this is still a study. Violent cartoons. So a group of boys is randomly divided into two groups. One group watches violent cartoons for 1 hour, and the other group watches cartoons without violence for 1 hour. The boys are then observed to see how many violent actions they take in the next 2 hours, and the two groups are compared. All right, so this is going to be an experiment because we're dividing these guys into groups, and then we're having one group watch the violent cartoons, the other group not. So those would be kind of the factor levels that we would be interested in. All right, power lines. The medical records of people who live near high power lines are compared with the medical records of people who do not live near high power lines to see whether they're more likely to have cancer or not. Okay, so this one you're going to have to think about how you would do this research in order to determine whether this is going to be a study or an experiment. So do you think that you're going to be able to tell people and assign people where to live for, I don't say 2 years? Think people are going to go along with that, where you're like, okay, I'd like you to live over here by the high power lines, and here you can live out in the suburbs where all the power lines are buried underground and there aren't even any by you. Okay, I think you would have a really difficult time carrying that out as an experiment, and for that reason, I'm going to say that this is a study. You also have an ethical issue here, which is another reason I would say it's not an experiment. So if you think that something is likely to cause cancer or possibly causes cancer, it would be highly unethical to assign people to here. We think that these high power lines might cause cancer, so we'd like you to live there. Well, I guess we'll find out if you get cancer afterwards. But so you have an ethical issue there too, which is also an indicator that this is going to be a study and not an experiment. All right, blind taste test. A researcher wonders whether the order in which people taste beverages influences their preference. Students are told by the researcher to drink from 2 unmarked cups. The researcher assigns one group of students to drink Coke first and then Pepsi. The other group drinks Pepsi first and then Coke. And then the students are asked which beverage they prefer. Okay, so this is an experiment because the researcher has put people into 2 groups and has designed the order in which they're going to taste the beverages. So we have an experiment on this one. All right, treating syphilis. Okay, much controversy arose over a study of patients with syphilis who were not given treatment that could have cured them. Their health was followed for years after they were found to have syphilis. Okay, so this is actually kind of a black mark on research in the United States. This actually happened in the United States, I want to say maybe about 100 years ago. So it was a long time ago. But they actually did do this. They had a cure and they selected a group of people. If I remember this correctly, I want to say that these were people that were in prison. I'd have to look that up and see, but they did not give them this treatment, okay? So this is actually going to be a study, even though you might be thinking it's an experiment because you're like, well, they didn't do something. But the idea of not doing something is, and you're just watching, this is going to be a study, okay? So I kind of like to think about the difference between studies and experiments in a kind of a sci-fi relationship, right? So if you watch any kind of sci-fi TV shows, you've seen the one alien race that comes and they just observe. They don't interfere. Maybe they see the planet is going awry and they have some sort of cure or solution, but they don't offer it because all they're there to do is to watch. So if you're a Star Trek fan, this is kind of like the prime directive idea, right? So they don't interfere in cultures and change their development. Okay, and then there's I don't know, the Area 51 version, which is the aliens come to Earth, they abduct people, they do experiments on them. It even has the word experiment in there, right? So they do something to people, right? Okay, so studies and experiments are kind of like those two genres of sci-fi. Okay, so in this case, they do have a cure for syphilis, but they're just not giving it, right? So they're just not interfering. That's going to be a study, okay? Really unfortunate. And this is why we have a lot of rules regarding ethics in human subjects. If you were going to do research here at the university and you were going to do an experiment that had human subjects, that generally has to go to some sort of review board that makes sure that there's not any ethical or implications or ways that you could be hurting your participants. Okay. All right, the next one, quality control. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration randomly selects a sample of Bayer aspirin tablets. The amount of aspirin in each tablet is measured for accuracy. So this is going to be a study, right? So we haven't done anything to the manufacturing process of these tablets. Basically, all we're doing is going to the factory, pulling a random sample, and sending them to the lab to get tested. Right. And then last but not least, magnetic bracelets. Cruise ship passengers are given magnetic bracelets, which they agree to wear in an attempt to eliminate or diminish the effects of motion sickness. So this is going to be an experiment because we gave these passengers these bracelets, and the passengers agreed to wear them. So they knew that they were supposed to wear them, that there's some sort of effect they're supposed to have. So this is going to fall under experiment.